Okay, good evening, folks. Hope everybody is doing well here. I'm just getting a couple things organized on my end, but if you are able to let me know that you're able to see my screen, I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing it there. Perfect. I can see so many people are already saying hi, but I don't know if they're saying hi to me or not. So folks, if you could let me know in the chat function that you can see my screen here, it should say the simplest method to start seeds. I'm going to go ahead, and hit the present mode, not the download mode. And that should be up and running. All right, I can see some thumbs up, see you, hear you. Perfect, perfect. Hey, Jennifer, been a while since we've been in touch. Hope you're doing well. John can see it. Amazing. All righty, folks. Well, good evening, everyone. So nice to be connecting with everybody on our first happy hour together with West Coast Seeds this season. And so we're going to go ahead and really start diving straight into things here with our housekeeping. And so for those of you that haven't been on happy hours before, really like to get to some of the questions that some of you might have over the course of our session. And so what I ask is that you kind of share and type your questions into the chat function on the right-hand side here. And so just to make sure that everybody knows where the chat function is, how to utilize it, I would love for you to share in there whether this is your first happy hour, your second, your third, your fourth. Go ahead and share in the chat function how many happy hours you have been on here. I want to hear those in the chat function. All right, second piece, for those of you that have been on happy hours before, you do know that this is the happy hour shirt that I have on here. I don't want this looking like, feeling like anything along the lines of a work meeting. And so I encourage you to grab yourself a drink and a snack, get a little beer or a wine, cocktail, mocktail, water, tea, anything in between. Grab yourself a snack and really start kind of slowing down out of being in working mode, working brain, and into rest and relaxation. And I can see so many comments coming through here about individuals that are on their first happy hour here. So Kat, great to have you. Steve, wonderful. Chuck, great to have you as well. Belinda, your first happy hour. This is amazing, folks. I have so much fun on these happy hours. And just kind of diving back to the presentation here, I can't really control my excitement with how many new folks we have. The last piece is that I encourage you to sit somewhere comfortable. Again, over the course of the week, we're putting out so much energy. Our kind of directed energy stores really get lowered down, depleted. I want us to slow down and kind of move out of being in working mode and into just rest and relaxation and have a heck of a lot of fun this evening. So given that there's so many individuals that are on here for the first time, you may not necessarily know who I am and who Annie is, who's joining me as well. So for those of you that I have not met before, I'm Jordan from Mind and Soil, and we're a gardening business, and we approach things a little bit differently in that we are entirely focused on helping individuals connect to the mental health benefits of gardening. So those of you that have been gardening for multiple seasons, multiple years, I am 100% sure that one of the reasons why you love feeling these longer and warmer days is because spring is just around the corner, and that means gardening time is just around the corner as well. And you know how much rest and peacefulness it brings you. And those of you that are on the newer side to gardening, I know that feeling that it can be a little bit daunting, a little bit overwhelming. And so a huge part of our responsibility here at Mind and Soil, I believe, is to be doing free education events just like this, to be helping each and every one of you feel comfortable and confident in the garden, taking as much of that guesswork out of it as possible so that you too can experience those mental health benefits. And so with that being said, we are on our YouTube channel here, and I really encourage you to subscribe to the channel here for two reasons. One, we put out multiple videos every single week that are going to be helping you all through the season. And the second piece is that, we're going to get some questions answered this evening, but there's going to be a lot more over the course of the season. And so you can leave a comment on any one of our videos as a question. And I start every one of my days by having a cup of coffee and answering every single question that we have on our YouTube comments. So really encourage you to subscribe to the channel here, and you're going to get those questions answered super quickly. quickly. But for this evening, when it comes to questions, we are super, super lucky because we are joined by Annie at West Coast Seeds. She is the farm coordinator over there, one of the most amazing gardeners that I've ever met. And I'm going to pass it over to Annie here. And she's dialed in here. She's going to share a little bit about her role at West Coast Seeds and what she does as the farm coordinator over there. So Annie, over to you here.
Okay, hello. So I'm Annie. I'm the farm coordinator at West Coast Seeds. The majority of my job is starting seeds and then talking about how they work for me and, how everything grows and tastes and all that. So yeah, I'm really into seed starting. We have a farm and greenhouse. So we start all the seeds that we might decide to sell, and then we grow them out in our field, and then we harvest them, taste them, and then if we like it enough, then we'll start selling it. And we have a good idea of what it'll grow like. So yeah.
Amazing. Annie, I'm curious if you were to try to ballpark how many seeds you've started over kind of your lifetime, your growing career, how many seeds do you think it would be?
Oh, geez. I have no idea. We do the seedling sale every year, which is about 10,000 seedlings. And then it's even more for our trials. So, and I did it for about 4 years is how long I've been doing it. So
Probably like over 100,000 seeds, I would say at least.
Yeah, many.
Amazing. Well, folks, like I mentioned, we're super fortunate to have Annie here. Some of the questions that come through, I'm going to pass those over to Annie, just so that we can be tapping into as much of her expertise as possible. But I want to begin diving into our presentation here. And I think that a bit of a fun place to get started is with my first year of starting seeds. And so take a look at this picture. Every single year, I start a set of seeds the exact same way that I did in my first year of starting seeds. And what we're about to see on the other side of this picture are the results of what happens when I start seeds utilizing the materials that I now utilize and the method that I utilize, which we're going to be going through this evening. And so these two seeds were started on the exact same day. But by utilizing the materials that we're about to go through, which is going to be the first part of our presentation, and utilizing the method that I'm going to walk you through, we now have seedlings growing like this, lush, big, bountiful, full of life, kind of chomping at the bit to be moving into the garden. So the way that we always start these happy hours is that if you're all set for me to begin diving into the first chunk of the presentation, then I want you to type into the chat function, "Let's grow," and we will get started on that. As those begin to roll in, take a look at this quote that we got from Brigida, and she joined this same happy hour last year. And she shared, "Jordan and his incredible company have developed products that my new garden and plant babies adore. Seedling mix and worm castings. One of my best memories of 2021 was getting into gardening and incorporating Jordan's beautiful approach to health and mindfulness." And so when we look at these pictures here, we probably think that Brigida has been growing, starting seeds for many years, but this was her first year of gardening. She started all these beautiful seeds inside under grow lights in the kind of right around this time last year, then popped them on her boat up to the cabin on the water there and had this beautiful garden on the deck all through the season. And I can see Kara saying, "Let's grow." Carol saying, "Let's grow." Monica, "Let's grow." Tanya, Patricia, Poor Pizza Dave saying, "Let's grow." All right, let's dive in with our materials that we want to have on hand for starting seeds. And there are 6 of them that we are going to cover off on for this first chunk of the happy hour. So the very first material that we want to have on hand, I think we got to start with the most straightforward one. And if we want to be starting seeds, we're of course going to be needing seeds. And so as we go through the presentation here, and if you check out the videos on our YouTube account or on Instagram, every single thing that you see coming from Mind and Soil, we do with seeds from West Coast Seeds. I've been using them since 2016 and absolutely, absolutely love them and have tons of success with them. I'm not sure if you see right behind me here in the picture, but all those cucumbers up there that I still have from last season came from the cucumber seeds that I was using from West Coast Seeds last season. First material done and dusted. Let's move on to number 2. So the second material is that if we have seeds, we need something to be starting them in. And that's where it is a seedling mix. And this is where I really encourage you, and I'm a big, I guess, definitely biased fan towards our worm casting seedling mix. And the reason why I like our worm casting seedling mix is because it's got those worm castings plus sifted compost in it, which is providing it all the nutrients, but then also the microbes, the bacteria, the enzymes for the plants to grow big and strong. And so last season, Annie and the team, they actually did a trial of our seedling mix alongside just a sterile store-bought seed starter, and take a look at how much larger and how much more lush the plants were when they were grown in that seedling mix of ours, that worm casting seedling mix. And again, that is because of those microbes and the nutrients, the bacteria and the enzymes. It's really helping your plant baby kind of develop its immunity system really, really early on, opposed to starting it in some form of a sterile environment. Alrighty, and so on to number 3. If we've got seeds and we now have our seedling mix, what do we put them into? So the third material that we want to have on hand here is seed cells and a tray. And this is an area where I actually go a little bit different to what some folks normally do. And what you can see here is that I start all of my seeds in a 3-inch seed cell. And I do that instead of kind of, I'd say, a more traditional 1-inch seed cell or 1-inch plug. And the reason why I really enjoy these slightly larger seed cells is because of 2 specific pieces or reasons. The first one is that because it's a little bit larger, there's less area for the air from the outside to be interacting with, which would be drying it out. And therefore the seedling mix, it stays moist for a longer period of time. And for our seeds to germinate and to begin to grow into beautiful little plant babies, they need to be in a moist and warm environment. And so what I found is by using a slightly larger seed cell at 3 inches, that seedling mix just stays moist for a little bit more time, and then gives me a higher likelihood of germinating and ultimately having more seeds germinating. And the second reason why is because with those 1-inch seed cells, you can start your seeds in them for sure, but after about 14 to 21 days, you need to move them into a little seed cell this size anyways. And so rather than starting a whole bunch of small ones, I just start a couple more seeds in a larger seed cell like this, and then I can skip through that process of having to pot things up around day 14 or day 21 there. So that is the third material that we are needing and wanting to have on hand here. Now, the fourth material that we want to have on hand, this is, I would say, hands down, the most important material for really taking seed starting to the next level. And so if there's one piece that I hope that you take from the materials here, or that you look to implement this coming season, it's our material number 4, and that is a grow light. And so the reason why a grow light is so important is because just the vast majority of windows that are out there are not going to be providing adequate light for our plant babies to be growing and really reaching their fullest potential. And so what I want to do is I want to actually show you this in a real life example that I've been doing and kind of running over the course of the last 5 or 6 weeks here. So take a look at this picture. This is in a windowsill, and I've got this little app on my phone called Light Meter. There's another one called Lux, and it is showing me that in the windowsill there are 4,041 lumens coming through, which right now is just a bit of an arbitrary number. But when we look in the background, take a look at each one of these seedlings, what we can see is that they are all really kind of leaning over towards the window and growing really, really long. And that is a classic sign of it being leggy. And so the plant, it's basically bending over, growing towards the light, trying to take more of it in and putting its energy towards length growth instead of foliage and leaf growth, because it is not getting enough light. So if you ever see that on your plants, It's a telltale sign that it's not getting enough light. And so this is where you would utilize a grow light to help ensure that your plant babies are getting enough light. And so let's go back to that first year of me starting seeds. I utilized a grow light, and take a look at this. How much light was I getting then? Even less, only now 555 lumens. And so that very first picture that I showed you, that's a big reason as to why they were so small and so far behind the ones that I now have for this season. And so, with all kind of grow lights not being created equal here, last year I decided to basically buy 6 different grow lights and set up different little stations so that I could see which one works best, which ones do I like the most, and take a look at the number of lumens that come out of the grow light that I now utilize. 36,920. And when we take a look at the leaves down below my phone there, where I'm utilizing this app, what we can see is that they are so big, so lush, green, and full of life. And that's because they're getting the amount of light to really live up to their fullest potential and put on all the growth that they would be looking to there. And so I have tried out a whole bunch of those different grow lights. We do now sell this one in our shop, so you would be able to pick one of them up this evening. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more right towards the very end here. And so the next 2 pieces that we're going to go through are the final 2 materials that we need to have on hand for starting our seeds. And so what I want to do is that if you have any questions on materials that we want to have on hand for starting seeds, go ahead and share those in the chat function, because I'm going to pause before we go into the method to answer a couple of those, and then we're going to get into the method. So as those questions start to roll through, the 5th material that we want to have on hand is a thermometer. So thermometer is really, really important because, again, for a seed to germinate and to begin to grow, it needs to be at least 21 Celsius. And so over the last kind of 5 or 6 weeks here, I've been doing a whole bunch of little different seed starting experiments. And I want you to take a look at how big of an impact temperature has on a plant growing. So take a look here, and I apologize that these are in Fahrenheit. I know I need to update those ones, but I think that 50 Fahrenheit, I'm not sure if I've got a thermometer. There it is. So 50 Fahrenheit, that would bring us right around 10 Celsius. And as we can see here, nothing has really germinated. Only a couple of the kale babies have germinated. And I'd say they're more like hanging on for dear life. Now, when we get to 60 Fahrenheit, which is around 15, 16 Celsius, what we can see is that the kale's germinated. It's putting on a couple leaves. The basil, it's germinated as well, but it's looking more like the kale in the first one, where it's just kind of holding on for dear life. And then as soon as we get above 70 Fahrenheit, that's where the plants really are in a warm enough environment to really begin putting on a lot of growth. And so in this image, these plants were all started with the exact same seedling mix in the same seed cells, underneath the same grow lights. The only difference was the temperature of the environment that they were in. And we've got the whole video for that over on our YouTube account if you wanted to dive into it at any point. So temperature wise, we want to make sure that we are at least in that kind of 20 to 21 Celsius range. And now our 6th and final material that we want to have on hand, it is a very, very complex one that you may not have ever seen before. And it is for watering our plant babies. And that is the turkey baster. You heard me right. I love to have a turkey baster on hand. I have found that the turkey baster is the best watering tool out there for seed starting, and I will defend that to the end of my time. And so with the turkey baster, the reason why I love it for watering is because it limits the amount of water that we can put in there at once. And that also means that it's going to slowly work its way into the seedling mix. And we're not kind of flooding it out or anything along those lines. And that creates a really nice, uniform kind of moisture level throughout the seedling mix. And the second piece is that take a look at that kale baby. If you start seeds this way and utilizing these materials, your babies are going to be growing really, really large. And so the kind of long neck of the turkey baster, it makes it really, really useful for kind of ducking and diving and weaving between those plants, getting the water right down to where the roots are going to be on that plant. So turkey baster is the final material that we like to have on hand. And so I'm going to jump over to the questions here, but just to wrap up on the materials front, these 6 materials that we've walked through, those make up the West Coast Seeds and Mind and Soil seed starting kit. And we ship those all across Canada, which we're going to be talking about towards the end. But all that to say is that you can get your hands on all of that if you wanted to there. Going to go ahead and pop over to the chat function here to pass a couple of questions along to Annie. All right, let's see what we've got here. I can see lots of chat amongst one another, but okay, I've got a question here from Calvin. So Annie, the question from Calvin was, you don't start seeds with the paper towel method. So Annie, I'd love to hear from you. Any thoughts on why you would utilize paper towel for starting seeds, and maybe kind of any alternatives that you utilize for starting all the seeds that you do on your end?
So for the paper towel method, I can't say I've used that a lot, but I do use it, which is, I assume, just wetting a paper towel, putting your seeds in between it and germinating them that way. I use that for seeds that I really, really want them to start, and I want to check on them every single day and like see them and see how they're doing. Or if I want to use cold stratification, so I want to have them in the fridge, and they germinate better when they're in the fridge for a while before starting them. So that's usually when I use that. But other than that, I always start them in some soilless seed mix or mind and soil mix, which is my personal favorite, obviously. So yeah, I don't use it a lot, but definitely for ones that I'm really worried about.
Yeah, totally. And definitely like really good for doing those germination tests as well with some seeds that are in kind of year 2, year 3, year 4, to see how many of them are still germinating.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, next question that I saw there was, what about humidity domes? So Annie, do you use humidity domes, and what are humidity domes used for?
Yeah, so I have tons of trays of seeds, but I usually have about 5 of those around, just for some things are kind of picky and they want to be sown on the surface of the soil and they need to stay moist the whole time. And so I'll use a humidity dome just to make sure that it's, being taken good care of. Or if lots of seeds have lots of different ways, to germinate them. So anytime it recommends one, I totally get one. And then if it's also a little bit cold where I'm starting the seeds, I'll use the heat mat with the humidity dome, and it can kind of raise the temperature in there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely there. And there's a kind of follow-up question to that is, if you're utilizing a heating mat, at what point do you take them off of the heating mat and begin to, I guess, have them in a different environment?
Yeah, so as soon as they germinate is when you want to take them off the heating mat. Sometimes if you leave them on a heating mat after they've germinated, they can get a little leggy and not grow so well. So it's really good the heating mat is really for germinating the seeds, and then you don't really need it after that.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's what I use it for.
totally. And folks, so if the house environment that you're in, or the growing environment that you're in, is not at that 20-21 Celsius range, which it isn't for me. I keep my house definitely cooler than that. I saw a comment in there on that front as well. And with that, what I have done, so there's kind of 2 ways that we can get the temperature up to where we want it to be for starting seeds. One option would be, as Annie just alluded to, a heating mat that we place underneath the seeds and the seed cells. And then the other option is to utilize kind of an enclosed area with a space heater. So for myself, I literally just put a sheet down and a space heater in there, and that brings it up to kind of like 22 Celsius. And then if it ever dips below that, then at that point, the space heater, it automatically kicks back on to bring it back above 22, 23 Celsius. Okay, and Annie, one last question before we dive into the method for going about starting seeds is, when it comes to the seedling mix that you have in there, are you compacting it and tamping it down at all, or do you not tamp it down? What's your personal preference on this?
So usually I will tamp it down a little bit before I place a seed in, and then put my seed in there and then cover it up and then lightly tamp it down, because I don't want the seed to, fall into some spaces and like disappear into the seed mix and never germinate. So I don't want to compact it too much, because then your water won't go through properly and you can have some issues with that. So just a little bit, just to make sure it's staying in place and it's really going to be in contact with the soil and the water.
Yes, love that. And this was something that I was curious about. So I actually did an experiment on that where I think I started cucumbers, zucchinis, basil, and tomatoes. And I compacted like as much as I could on one of those sets of seeds. And then the other ones, I just kind of shook it gently. And there wasn't a noticeable difference between either one of them. So even when it was super compacted down, seeds still germinated and grew through. However, a couple more did come through when it was a little bit lighter there. And when we think about it, the watering that we're doing, that is going to be compacting it as well and kind of moving some of that air out. So I've shifted, like you, Annie, to doing a little bit less compacting and letting gravity just do that over the course of a couple of days there. So folks, amazing, amazing questions that are coming through here. I know that I haven't gotten to each and every one of them, but towards the end of our session, we are going to be answering more of those questions. So if I didn't get to one right now, save it for the end. And then if we don't get to the end, then you can leave that on as a comment on any one of the videos, and I'll get an answer to it first thing tomorrow morning, or probably even later this evening. So what I want to do next is begin diving into the method. And one thing that I think is probably quite clear just from the dialogue that Annie and I have had back and forth here is that there is absolutely not one right way and one wrong way to be starting seeds, but rather a whole number of different ways that you can be going about it. And so this is the method that I have kind of grown to love. And there's absolutely going to be some kind of like variations to that you could do. So don't take this as you have to follow things exactly this way. And towards the end, I'll love to hear what Annie does that might be a little bit different to how I go about it, so that I can also be learning from her there. So for our method for getting those seeds started, super simple. And that's kind of the big thing that I focus on. And so it's only 5 steps that we need to walk through here. And the first one is simply placing our seedling mix into the seed cells. And so what I like to do is just kind of line them up, and I fill it to about 1 centimeter from the top here. So as we can see, I kind of fill them all up, and then I just go through with my hand and give them a little bit of a shake. So again, we've got that kind of like nice, not quite compact, but even surface to be placing our seeds onto. And so it ends up looking just like this. Step 1, already done and dusted. We are on to step number 2 here. And so what we want to be doing with our second step is moistening our seedling mix. And this is where the turkey baster comes in. And I do 1 full turkey baste per seed cell. So I fill it up, and then I pour out the entirety of that turkey baste into the seed cell. And I move from one on to the next here. And I like, again, to utilize this turkey baster because rather than flooding it out there, we're now going to do 3 rounds of watering. So this is the first round. We're going to add a little bit more water in. And again, that helps ensure that it just kind of slowly makes its way through the seedling mix there. So now that we have our seedling mix nice and moist, the next thing that we need to be doing is getting our seeds in there. And again, this is where I maybe go a little bit different than some folks in that I use a larger seed cell and I place a couple more seeds in there. So I like to think of each one of these seed cells as a plant that I want to have in my garden. So if I wanted to have 3 tomato plants in my garden, then I would start 5 seeds in this seed cell, 5 seeds in this seed cell, and 5 seeds in this seed cell over here, with hopes that I'm going to have one of them germinating and then ultimately growing into a little plant baby. And what you're going to see in not too long is that you're probably going to end up with a couple extras. So all that I do is that I grab my pack of seeds, pour some out into my hand, and I just place those onto the top surface of the moist soil here. And I like to evenly space them out. First 2 on the top, third one in the middle there, fourth one down below, and then the fifth one going into the corner there. So we've got our 5 seed cells into the seed cell now. Sorry, our 5 seeds into the seed cell now. And you're just going to kind of cruise around doing each round of that. And, you know, this is an area where I really encourage you to kind of put some dedicated time aside for your seed starting, whether that's during a weeknight or over the course of the weekend. Grab yourself a drink, have a snack, really enjoy that time. Don't feel like you have to rush through it, anything along those lines. Enjoy the beginning of the gardening season. All right, and so now that we've got the seeds in there, we need to get those moist as well. So I come back through with my turkey baster for the second round of watering here. And so all that I do is I fill up the turkey baster with water, and then I unleash that onto each one of the seed cells, pouring a full turkey baster of water onto each of the seed cells. So they are now looking just like this. The 5 seeds in there, they are nice and moist, all good, ready to go. And so the last piece that we would want to be doing in terms of prepping this seed cell for getting those seeds into that perfect environment to begin growing is to just cover them with a little bit of seedling mix. And so all that I'm going to do is grab, kind of like a handful of the worm casting seedling mix, and I'm just going to dump about half a handful on there. So this ends up being kind of in and around 1 centimeter, maybe even a little bit less. And what I have found is that, it doesn't matter tons if it's a half centimeter, if it's a centimeter, if it's a centimeter and a half. We definitely don't want to like bury them really, really deeply, but a little bit of a covering just so that they're nicely secured in there and have something for the roots to be growing into. And as you saw, I like to then just kind of like gently shake them a little bit so that that seedling mix gets nice and even across the board there. And then we moisten that. So this is our third and final round of moistening the seedling mix here. And so all that I'm looking to do in this particular instance is get it nice and moist and adding that third round of watering. And again, that's now meaning that we've got water and moisture in the seedling mix that the seeds are sitting on. The seeds, we put water directly on them, so we know that they're moist. And now the seedling mix above them is moist as well. And I really enjoy doing it in these rounds opposed to pre-watering or pre-moistening it, just because it helps keep it a little bit looser in there as well. And so just like that, in literally a couple of minutes, we've done everything that we need to do for these plant babies to germinate and to begin to grow. And so the last thing, the 5th step that we need to be doing here is that we need to find that nice and warm environment for them to be growing in. And so this is where we're going to take that thermometer and we want to find that area. And once again, if we don't have an area, a part of our house that is at least 70 Fahrenheit, 21 Celsius, then we can either use a heating mat or we can enclose an area and use a space heater. And so all that we're going to do for step 5 is place that set of seeds underneath one of the grow lights here. And we want to leave that on for 12 to 13 hours per day. So we take a look at those ones there and the thermometer right beside there, perfectly sitting at 21 Celsius. And so all those plant babies are doing is hanging out underneath that grow light for those 12 to 13 hours per day. We don't need to be doing anything more for them. They have everything that they need in order to germinate and to begin to grow. So for myself, I've got a little kind of like automatic timer. It turns on at 7:30 in the morning, grow lights go on. And then at 8:30 at night, it turns off, grow lights go off. Same thing happens the next day. I know a lot of individuals in our community, they've got young kids, and this is one of their favorite things to do as they move into the springtime is go down there, turn on the grow lights together, and wait for kind of like that magical moment when the first plant babies begin to break through the surface, having successfully germinated. But what's going to happen as you move to day 2, day 3, is we're going to kind of need to figure out if it's still moist or when do we go about watering. And so this is an area where I can provide you a rule of thumb or a little bit of guidance, but it's going to vary a little bit for each and every one of us, because if you are using a heating mat, it's going to dry up a little bit more quickly. If you are using a fan in there, that's going to be blowing air through, that's going to dry it up more quickly. If it is 23, 24, 25 Celsius on your end, it's going to dry up a little bit more quickly. So there is not a right or wrong, it must be watered on this frequency, but rather it's going to vary a little bit for each and every one of us. The rule of thumb that I like to go off of is watering them every 2 to 3 days. And the way that I kind of keep an eye on it is that I look at the soil. And so if you notice that your seedling mix is beginning to look more like milk chocolate and a lighter brown, that is a sign that it is beginning to dry up and it is time for that next round of a turkey baste. And then if you notice that your seedling mix is still looking kind of more like dark chocolate and a darker color, that's a sign that it is still moist. The other way that you would be able to notice this is if you place the back of your hand onto that seed cell, and if you feel moisture on it, then you're all good. If you don't, perfect time to be doing the first round of watering. And so to help you keep track of this, and on top of this, especially if it's in your first season of starting seeds, what I have put together is a little seed starting tracker. And so before you start your seeds, you're going to be able to make sure that you've got your seeds, your grow light, your seedling mix, thermometer, seed cells, turkey baster, all set, ready to go. And then in terms of the method, what we're going to be able to do down here is keep track of when you've gone about starting those seeds and then when you've gone about watering as well. And so what we can see here is that for those seeds that I just showed you putting the seeds into and starting, I've now gotten them written down. So I started some tomato seeds, those kale seeds, basil, zucchinis, and cucumbers. And that was day 0 when we went through there and we were starting those seeds. And so what I want to do now is I want to fast forward us to day 3, and let's take a look and let's see if any of those have germinated in the first 3 days here. So let's take a look on our day 3 check-in. Nothing, 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 nothing. But we do already have a kale baby breaking through the surface. And so all that I'm doing is doing my first round of watering here. And so I fill up the turkey baster with water, and then I'm pouring 1 turkey baste into each one of those seed cells. And I go back to my seed starting tracker, and I can then add in my check marks that I've added water for each one of those plant babies. We are all good, ready to go on that front there. You can also add in the temperature here just to do a quick little double check to make sure that the temperature where you're starting your seeds is sufficiently warm. Now, if you're on day 3 and you don't have anything germinated, that is totally normal. So it's totally possible that there's nothing that's germinated on day 3 there. And so what I want to do next is fast forward to day 6, and it's time for our next watering. Let's see if any of those plant babies have successfully germinated. And look here, we got a whole bunch of basil. We've got zucchini there, all 5 of the tomatoes, multiple cucumbers, and then kale as well. Only on day 6 days in using this method and these materials, and all those plant babies have already successfully germinated and are beginning to grow. And once again, with it being kind of 3 days later, I'm doing my next round of watering, 1 turkey baste onto each one of those seed cells. And I can go back to my seed starting tracker. I can check off that I've done my watering, which you're going to want to do this as you start more and more seeds. It can start getting a little bit like, which ones did I start on which days? And on day 6, day 7, there's also an area here where you can type in and share the number of plant babies that have successfully germinated for you. So 5 tomatoes, 3 kale, 5 basil, 2 zucchinis, 3 cucumbers. So the last thing that I want to do before we dive into a little bit of Q&A is to take us a little bit further out. And if we continue to follow this method of watering kind of every 3 days, and what do things look like when we get to day 24, day 25, utilizing this method? So let's fast forward to our day 25 check-in and take a look here. Day 25, the zucchini is thriving. The tomatoes are huge, looking absolutely beautiful. The kale baby is doing super, super good in there. Everything is really, really thriving and looking full of life here. And take a look down here at this one seed cell with the kale in it. It is looking a little bit dry, so that's the perfect time for me to be doing my next round of watering. But folks, if you utilize those materials, and if you utilize that super simple method of getting those seeds started in the seedling mix, and then underneath that grow light for 12 to 13 hours per day in a warm environment, I guarantee that you are going to end up with beautiful plant babies just like this on day 7, day 14, and then just like that on day 25 there. So folks, as we begin to wrap up here, there are two kind of extra pieces that we do have available for you. And so as I mentioned, all of those materials that we've gone through today, those are included in the Mind and Soil and West Coast Seeds seed starting kit. And so if you did want to get your hands on that so that you don't have to be running around, grabbing seeds, seedling mix, figuring out if you've got a good grow light or not, you can order that on our website. And the link to it is in the description of this video and this live stream here. So you can click on that to head straight over to our website. But not only that, with that seed starting kit, we do a 100% money back guarantee that you will start seeds, and we ship it to you free of charge all across Canada. So if you want to utilize it, we're going to be starting seeds using the exact same setup, going to be able to help you all through the season here. And again, the link for that is down in the description. Now, if you already have a number of those pieces on hand and you just need the seedling mix, then our worm casting seedling mix, we are doing free shipping on that, on the 3-bag orders all across Canada over the course of now until the end of the weekend. So if you wanted to get your hands on just the worm casting seedling mix, then what you can do is head to the link in the description of this video. The discount code for the free shipping is already applied on there. So it should be super straightforward and easy for you to be adding that into your cart and getting it. And we are going to be shipping out all of this at the beginning of next week. So any orders that come through between now and the end of the weekend, those are going to be shipped out beginning of next week so that you've got everything that you need in time for March, when it is pretty much the earliest that we can be starting most of our seeds here in Canada. So folks, that is everything that I wanted to cover off on this evening. I would love to hear in the chat function what's been useful, what's been valuable, what's been new for you, but then also any questions that you might have. So I'm going to go and begin diving into the chat here to see what there is. Okay, so an amazing question here from Sabine. Sabine asked, will you talk about transplanting next time? So yes, Sabine, if you have enjoyed your time here this evening with us, we do happy hours once per month. We're at the beginning of the season, so of course it is seed starting right now. As the plant babies begin to grow, one of the next happy hours is going to be all focused on how to prep your soils and the garden space for when we then transplant them. And that's the third happy hour that we're going to have, is hardening them off, transplanting them. But on top of that, some structures that we can utilize at the beginning of the season and throughout the season to make it a little bit warmer if we've got like a bit of a January situation, and to make it a little bit cooler if we've got more of a heat dome situation. So lots that we're going to be covering in the upcoming happy hours, transplanting absolutely being one of them. All righty, let's see here. Okay, so Annie, I've got a question here from Christine. If using grow lights and a heating mat, do you start seeds at the same time? I worry about the plants being ready before the weather arrives.
So yes, so that is something to think about if you have like some very nice ideal conditions for when you're starting seeds. They will start sooner and they'll be a little quicker growing, and so you're going to need to do something with them a little bit earlier. So I kind of just like to consider that maybe an extra week you can wait, and then it might not work out and you just need to record that in your spreadsheet and remember it for next year. But trial and error is really good, and get some larger pots so you can just keep potting them up until you're ready to put them outside. That's what I do.
Love it. I got another question here from Kay's. When do you thin them out, Annie? And maybe further to that point, Annie, because you're starting so many seeds, I'd love to kind of hear what differences that you might have with how you start seeds, how you pot them up, and when you thin them out.
Yeah, so usually when we're starting seeds, we start them in a tray because we're just starting so many. So we'll have like a 72 cell tray or a 128 cell tray, which is probably more than most people need for their home garden. So we'll typically, it totally depends, honestly. Like if we're growing peppermint, then we'll just sprinkle a bunch of seeds on there. And then because you can have a bunch of sprouts of peppermint, and that's kind of how it grows. But if we're doing squash, then we'll just do one or maybe two if we're worried about it not germinating because they're huge, right?
Mhm.
So it totally, it depends on the seed, but the larger the seed, the less we'll plant, and the higher the germination rate, the less we'll plant. So that's good to pay attention to.
Yeah, totally. And maybe some people caught it when I did I think it was the day 6 check-in there, where, the basil, there were more than 5 that had actually germinated in there. And that's because like it's such a small seed that I usually end up just sprinkling a couple more in there. So once again, really not a right and a wrong way or one way that you go about it, but multiple different approaches to how you would go about doing it. Okay, gonna see. There was a question that oh, Annie, I've got a question for you that I'm curious about. So there's a question coming from Jordan, and that is, which seeds do you put into the refrigerator before you start them? What are some of the ones you have on that list, and why would you do that?
So some plants grow in different conditions. And so what happens is they'll release their seeds, the end of the year, and then those seeds will sit in the ground over the winter, and then they'll wait until the spring comes and then they'll sprout. So those seeds are adapted to those conditions. So that means that if you're going to start those seeds, you're kind of recreating those conditions where you'll stick them in the fridge, and that's your winter time, and then you'll take them out and that's your springtime. So this is for a lot of like tree seeds, some perennials. There's a lot of native plants that do that as well. And usually it'll say, on the seed packet or wherever you look it up, it needs cold stratification. So that's how I know when to do that. And it's pretty simple. You can do it pretty easily. Sometimes you don't even need to.
Love it. That's one that I haven't done any experiments on just yet, but I'm very kind of curious and fascinated to do over the coming weeks and probably years here, because we've already done a lot of seed starting experiments for this season here. Okay, let's see if we got a couple more. Okay, great question here from Shirley. So Annie, do you ever use peat pots, and then do you plant those straight into the garden? Any thoughts there?
So I don't prefer to use a lot of peat just because it's not the most sustainable thing. So I love mixes and things with less peat, but it is really nice that you can just plant them out and you don't need to worry about using plastic. So, I'm pretty 50-50 on that one, but they're really good for things where you don't want to disturb the roots. So sometimes on a seed packet, it'll say, plant this directly out so you don't disturb the roots because it might not grow well. So then it's great to just use, like those peat pots, or they have cow pots now, which I like a lot more, which is made from cow manure, I think, and it's just made into a pot. So yeah, those are definitely pretty great. They have lots of good uses.
Super, super interesting. There've been a couple questions that have come through on the grow lights front, so I'll jump on to those ones, and then we'll maybe pass one more along to Annie there. But and just as I answer these, I would love to hear if anybody's going to be at the BC Home and Garden Show, because I've got, I think, 3 talks that I'm doing there, and one of them is going to be with Carissa from West Coast Seeds. So let me know if any of you are going to be at the BC Home and Garden Show, because I would absolutely love to connect with you. But on the grow light front, so the one that I love to utilize is the Monios LED. And I like to go with a 2-foot grow light instead of a 4-foot grow light. The The reason why I prefer a 2-foot grow light is because I can have one nice and low, and then I can have the other one a little bit higher up. So some of those plants that are a little bit further along or that grow a little bit more vertically, I can have them underneath the higher up grow light. And then the smaller and the shorter plants, I have them underneath the lower down grow light. And the reason why I like those specific grow lights so much is because they come with a little hanger directly when you receive them. So you don't have to be kind of rigging any kind of little system up. It all comes with you in the box there. And again, we do have those available on our website. Although I anticipate that we're going to sell out fairly quickly of those because we don't have tons left in stock here. So we do have them at the moment though. All right, let's see if we can grab one more question for Annie here. Let's see. Question from Shirley. When is the garden show? That is March 11th and 12th. Let's see here. Question from Kara for you, Annie. For seeds that you sow on the surface of the soil, do you sprinkle grit or vermiculite over the seeds? So Annie, maybe what would be a few of those seeds and why would you add vermiculite over top of them?
So yeah, so there's a lot of like really tiny seeds that the best way to germinate them is just for them to be on top of the soil so you're not accidentally covering them a little bit too much. So usually I will use vermiculite. I've actually been using worm castings a lot more instead, or as well as just to like kind of sprinkle on top a little bit. But vermiculite's really good because it'll kind of keep the surface a little bit more moist. And yeah, but you don't necessarily need it. Usually I'll just be very, very on top of my watering and use a cover. And that can be like a plastic dome or a plastic bag or whatever you got on hand. Anything's good. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of really like lobelia, I think is a good example, really tiny seeds.
For sure, yeah. And I saw an individual earlier asked about plastic bags, which would totally help for keeping that humidity in there as well. And it's so funny that you mentioned utilizing worm castings instead of vermiculite, because literally earlier today, about 2 hours before this, I launched our most recent video. And one of the reasons why we see so many seeds germinate in our worm casting seedling mix, which I think like was the case with the shisho peppers that you did last year, is because of those worm castings and just how much moisture they hold onto, which would be accomplishing the same thing as the vermiculite, as you alluded to there.
Yes, yeah.
Amazing. Well, I think that is all for this evening here, folks. I'm going to go ahead. I thought there was maybe one more question that I wanted to get to in there. Yes, yeah, one last question from Jennifer here. Annie, this one's for you. What about peas? Do we germinate them first or do the same method? Do you start those inside, outside, direct sow? What's your plan with peas?
So for peas, it kind of depends for me usually. But I do usually start them inside, but they're totally good to start outside as well. Yeah, I mean, I just start them with the same method. Usually they're really fast, so that's the only thing that I really change is that I know they're going to germinate really fast, so I start them a little bit later.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that I'm going to direct sow my peas this year.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah, I'm going to run out of space in here because I'm trying to eat from my garden every single day of the year here, which also means that I really have to maximize my indoor seed starting space. So some of them, such as peas, they might get direct sown out in the garden this season. But folks, that is everything that we wanted to cover off on this evening here. So thank you all so much for the amazing questions coming through here. I hope to see some of you either at the BC Home and Garden Show or on our next happy hour, which will send you kind of through the notification and the RSVP for that. But if you do have any questions this evening, I'm going to be online on the chat function on our website in case you're looking to place an order for the seed starting kit or the seedling mix. And then any other questions, go ahead and just send those through as comments on our YouTube videos. I'll get responses to you super, super quickly there. And that is everything here, folks. Thank you all so much for the evening and can't wait to catch you on the next one. See you soon.